Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our May 3rd edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler. Of course, May is National Beef Month, and today we'll introduce you to ChopLocal, an online marketplace for farmers and butchers that has dubbed itself the Etsy of meat. And since May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, we're also bringing on an expert with Iowa State Extension to talk about identifying and reacting to worrisome signs of stress that we see in our friends and family members. We'll start with the co-founders of ChopLocal, Jared Achen and Katie Olthoff, who discovered a need for livestock farmers and butchers in the midst of COVID-19 disruptions last spring and started working on a solution. Spokesman reporter Corey Munson has the story.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Hey, Katie, can you tell us a little bit about ChopLocal, what it is, and how does it work?
Sure. So ChopLocal is what we call the Etsy of meat. It is a multi-vendor marketplace where farmers and butchers from across the country, right now they're mostly in the Midwest, but farmers and butchers can list their products for sale and reach customers that they may not have been able to reach otherwise.
Now, Jared, I understand this is kind of your brainchild, so can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start ChopLocal with Katie?
Yeah, so my background is in turkey production, and I'm part of Katie and I both are part of Westlery Foods in Westlery, Iowa, which is a cooperative turkey processor that's about 40 different growers went together back in 96 and purchased a Lewis Ridge processing plant, and now they further process proteins. So my background is in meat sales and in meat production. And when COVID hit in May, there was a major disruption in our market. Not only from not being able to staff plants, but also most of our meats go into retail restaurant sales. And as you know, restaurants were closed down. So we really had our backs against the wall. And, you know, when you get into tough times like that, you just start thinking of different opportunities, you know, where are they at? And that's really what sparked this. You kind of saw the disruption in the supply chain. Meat processing in the U.S. is very, very efficient, but you can tell when it's very efficient, it becomes very fragile. So, I thought about how can you fix the supply chain with technology to make it more resilient while keeping it efficient. You know, we finally ended up on this marketplace platform and what we call the Etsy of meat, and just allowing software to make those connections in the supply chain. But also we knew to fix the supply chain, you got to have the market, and that's the most important thing. And so that's where we looked at this e-commerce business and building this marketplace to connect everybody in between and bring more value to small farmers and processors across the Midwest.
This seems like a great opportunity for farmers to share their products directly to consumers. Why is selling meat locally and regionally so important right now?
You know, Corey, I came from the Iowa Cattlemen's Association, and this is something that we've been battling in the cattle industry for a long time, and that is the consolidation among the packers and the lack of opportunity to really sell your livestock at a competitive price. And so, especially in the cattle industry, we have a lot of farmers that are looking to do more direct-to-consumer sales, but there's a lot that goes into it, right? They're really focused on creating the best product possible through their feed regimen and their, breeding and genetics and things like that. They're not as focused on the latest trends in e-commerce and how they can compete against the big guys and the Walmarts and that type of thing. And so, like you said, it is a great opportunity. They can still focus on what they do best, but then we can come in through ChopLocal and help them get that high quality product to more customers, not just the people that they know locally, not just the people at the farmers market on Saturdays, but really we can help them ship it anywhere that they want. And we know that that does add value. It adds time to what they're doing too. It takes time and it takes some skill, but it also adds value to the farm.
Now, when a producer signs up for the service, tell me a little bit about what he or she can expect on the website.
When a farmer or a small processor, a locker or a butcher shop signs up, they can come to the website and basically they're going to get in contact with me first, and I'm going to help guide them through the onboarding process. We're going to set up what we call their micro store. It's their own landing page where they can tell the story about their farm or their business. It lists all of their products there. I'm going to help them get their products up online, make sure that the photos look good, make sure that the descriptions are appealing, and any pertinent information about the farm and about the products is included in those descriptions. And then we also provide them support with how to ship their meat. So this is huge. Shipping frozen meat is complicated and it can be really expensive, but that's one of the things that we've worked on is really simplifying that process and running a bunch of tests and finding out the best practices to make sure that it arrives frozen, how much coolant you need, what kind of insulation you need, and how can we do that at absolutely the best price possible while still maintaining the quality. And so we're also going to be providing them with that support along the way as well.
And as far as the reach of this website, can products on the site be sold across the U.S. right now, or is it only in Iowa?
It depends on the seller. So we have set up our website that if you are state inspected, your meat will only be seen by people that log in from the state of Iowa. So if you are a state inspected locker in Iowa, the customers will only be able to see your products in the state of Iowa. Now, if you're going through a federally inspected locker, which there's a handful of those in Iowa, customers outside of Iowa will be able to see your products. So essentially, we can ship meat. We have vendors, farmers on our site, butchers on our site that can ship meat all across the U.S. And we have seen some of those sales. We've shipped products to Colorado. We've shipped products to Arizona. One thing we do is set up shipping rates to make sure that our vendors are compensated for those long shipments and the customer can get those in a timely manner.
So when a customer visits the site, there's a variety of cuts and a variety of options for them. Describe to me a little bit about what the meat offerings are on ChopLocal.
We have such a wide variety. It's really interesting because we have a lot of great high quality steaks and pork chops, that type of meat. But then we also have Iowa rabbit, which is whole rabbits that are raised by some Amish farmers here in Iowa. We also have some pre-cooked options that all you have to do is heat and serve them. And those come from WG Meat Box, which WG does all the shredded beef for the hot beef Sunday at the state fair. So I know that your listeners know what I'm talking about. They can actually get online and order a hot beef Sunday meal kit and replicate that at home, which I think is awesome. But then we are just starting to launch our kind of custom butchered offerings. So if you are looking for freezer beef, freezer pork, you want to buy a half or a whole or a quarter of one of these animals and then have it processed at a local locker, we're opening that up for farmers to now list those as well. So really, we've said all along we want to be the one-stop shop. We don't want customers to have to run all over the internet looking to compare and looking for different products. We want you to be able to find whatever you need related to meat right here on ChopLocal.
Now, we've seen several of these sites pop up recently, offering to sell, farm fresh products direct to consumers. What do you think, in your opinion, sets ChopLocal apart, and what makes your company unique?
I think the biggest thing that sets us apart from a farmer listing standpoint is the hands-on service you get from us. We go over the top to help you. We step you through these shipping methods. We step you through setting these things up. It's not just dumped on you and you have to figure it all out. We are a commission-based system. So the only way that we are successful is if you are successful as well. And then from the customer standpoint, we are the only place that you can get on and really surf and look at multiple different farmers and butchers in one place. And our website allows a very easy way to purchase from multiple different vendors and get the cuts that you want.
Another thing that I think makes us unique is that a lot of these websites really focus on niche agriculture and specialty marketing claims like organic or grass-fed, things like that. We have made the commitment to allow all types of agriculture, any type of production methods on our site, and our vendors, our farmers are free to use those terms as long as they comply with USDA guidelines, but they're not allowed to disparage any other type of agriculture. And that's something that's really important to us as well.
What's been the response so far, both from farmers who've signed up as well as consumers who have bought from you?
It's been a great experience so far. We have so many farmers and butchers coming to us on a daily basis that want to be a part of this. And that shows Jared and I, especially, how much of a need there is for farmers to have more support in selling online, and also how much of a need there is for them to have alternative markets to sell their livestock. On the other side of that, the consumers seem really drawn to being able to purchase from a smaller vendor and kind of bypassing those major retailers. You and I, we know that there's nothing wrong with that meat, but we also know that customers want traceability, and this is a great way for them to get it. And so they like to hear those stories. They like to get to know the farmers, and we're seeing that really seems to resonate with them.
One thing I do know is the quality too. Coming from these small butchers, their livelihood depends on you getting the best quality. And that's what we've heard from our customers is just the quality of meats that they can get from these butchers or farmers going through small lockers here in Iowa.
And just Iowa in general. Jared mentioned some of the shipments that we're sending across the country. A lot of those are either Iowans who are now living somewhere else, but they miss that quality that they got while they lived here, or they are Iowans who are sending it to family members who, again, know that they're going to get high quality meat from Iowa. And, we do have a vendor from another state right now, but for the most part, most of our meat is coming from Iowa. And we have had really great success and great customer feedback on just how good that meat is.
If you raise livestock, I'm guessing that interview got your wheels turning a bit. Marketing meat directly to consumers is definitely an intriguing option, but it can also be intimidating. So it's great to see so many ag entrepreneurs getting into this space and creating opportunities for livestock farmers. If you like what you heard there from Jared and Katie, you can learn more at ChopLocal.com. If you're a longtime listener, you know that we've spent quite a bit of time on the topic of farm stress over the past couple of years, including conversations with Dr. Larry Tranel of Iowa State Extension, Emily Kreckelberg of the University of Minnesota, inspirational speaker Chris Norton, and many others. Today, we're pleased to bring on Demi Johnson, a behavioral health program coordinator with Iowa State Extension, to discuss a topic that's so important right now. How do we identify unhealthy stress in the friends and family in our lives, and how can we react to those signs in a way that's helpful? Demi has insights into those areas and more. Farm Bureau's Caitlin Lamb takes it from here.
Hi, Demi. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell me more about your role with Iowa State Extension and Outreach?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am our behavioral health program coordinator. So I am the person behind the scenes scheduling a lot of our mental health programs across the state, and I also teach many of them.
And previously in other Spokesman Speaks episodes, we have had extension professionals on to talk about mental health in the ag community. But the conversations focused on recognizing signs of stress in yourself and coping mechanisms to deal with that stress. And today I want to talk to you about what it's like to be the person who notices the stress in another individual, whether it's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, or maybe even someone who's an ag customer. So to get us started, can you tell us about the signs of stress we may observe in another person, maybe even those that may be more subtle?
Absolutely. I think one of the most common ones that we hear is somebody saying, "Oh, I'm tired." And this could truly just be that they're physically tired. They were up all night in the barn, unable to sleep. But especially if this person is like your spouse and you know that their physical needs have been met, "I'm tired" can be a statement that holds a lot of weight, meaning I'm emotionally tired, I'm mentally tired, I'm burnt out. We might also see some different behavioral changes, like maybe an increase in alcohol use, just as a coping mechanism, but that's not necessarily like socially sanctioned, or non-typical behavior for that person. So maybe an unkept appearance or a more angry reaction to a stressor that just seems out of the norm for them.
And that makes sense. My husband is also a farmer, and we have a toddler who's 3, and we just had a new baby here in January, and she just turned 3 months. So when I say I'm tired, I mean like all of it. I'm physically tired. I'm mentally tired. I just want to think about nothing. So that definitely resonates for me on another level too.
Yes, that statement holds a lot of weight.
Well, and as you know, in the ag community, so mental health has historically been talked about. I think the tides are turning on that a bit, but for a number of reasons, the idea of needing to toughen up, maybe not wanting to worry landlords, feeling the need to be that person of strength in your family, someone may not want to talk about necessarily what they're going through. So when we recognize others going through a tough time, we ask, hey, is everything okay? And sometimes the response is, oh, I'm fine, just stuff, the usual. How do you get over that I'm fine hurdle and get someone to open up when you're seeing those clear signs of stress?
This one's so tricky because it is so common. And it kind of comes down to sometimes you just have to be a little more direct and a little more straightforward. So, especially depending on your relationship with this person, you can take it as it is and just follow up with them later and say, okay, I'm checking in again. How are you doing? And if that's not working and the signs are getting worse, then it's time to say, hey, I've noticed that you've been different lately. And maybe even take it as far as saying, like, some of the behaviors that you're doing are clear symptoms of severe, psychological issues, and I don't think that you're fine. And I want to be able to help you get help. And it's hard, right? Like, we don't want to say that to people. It's weird, but sometimes we just need to. And statistically, we know that that is more appropriate and that that helps people finally get the professional help that they need.
And that would be really a hard conversation to have, to point out those things like, oh, I noticed that maybe you don't look as well as you normally do. You seem tired, you seem angry. But I bet it does kind of force people to confront what they're conveying to other people. It's almost like a journey to self-awareness when someone else points it out to you, I would think.
Yeah, so we want to be kind of careful. We never want to be like, geez, Bob, you look like crap today, right? But, hey, honey, if it's your spouse or something, you've been drinking more than normal lately. Can we talk about that? What's going on? And just being supportive and open and listening if they talk back or start to open up, but also direct enough that you're not just accepting I'm fine as an answer when you know that they're not fine.
Sure. And it seems like a lot of us may stop at that I'm fine response because we don't want to push it, or we fear that we're going to drive that person away or say the wrong thing, even though we really just want to show that we have concern for this person's well-being. So what's an effective way to show support, and what phrases might we want to avoid? Like, Bob, you look like crap.
For the most part, depending on your relationship with this person, how well you know them, how you would normally communicate with them, you likely won't make things worse. So some things that you could say is, like, if you have a lot on your plate, what can I do to help? Can I mow your lawn? I'm going into town. Can I pick you up some groceries or dog food or whatever? So trying to offer help with a solution attached to it is also sometimes a way to reduce some stress burden and kind of build that support system where they know that you're there for them. As far as statements go, really, we just never want to say a statement that asks the person we're talking to not tell us the truth. And so in an extreme case, right, in a full crisis, we never want to say something like, oh, you weren't being serious about that comment you made about killing yourself, or something that's just really giving the closed off statement that, I don't really want you to tell me this because I'm not capable of handling this conversation. We want to keep it open-ended and positive.
Yeah, that's really a great point to keep an open conversation going. And I want to go back to something that you said just now about, can I mow your lawn? Can I, run errands in town for you? Because I had never thought of it this way until I took, maybe it was the mental health first aid training or one of those other ones that Extension offers. But whenever someone gets cancer or breaks a bone, and all the ways that we try to assist that person, taking, their kids out for an afternoon so they can rest, getting their groceries. And you don't see that as much when someone is struggling with a mental health challenge.
Yeah, there's a lot of this feeling of hush hush around it. And you said earlier you have kids in your family, or knew a baby. And I kind of think that sometimes the mental health challenges that we experience with new children are some of the same ones that we can experience even without them. And for some folks, when there's a new baby in the family, people know, like, hey, they could use some extra meals. They could use some extra time to take a nap. They could use some extra help around the yard. And it's kind of the same and similar concepts, not completely the same. But if you just know that this person's experiencing some mental health challenges, maybe that's grief or just stress or too much. And so to just be able to take some things off their plate is a good first step.
And I think that's a good way to think about it, is just being, agricultural communities come together all the time for things. We see when people have a death in the family and all the combines get out there and harvest the crop that's been left. And so it's not, out of the realm of possibility to have that type of spirit to helping someone who is going through grief or depression or some other type of struggle like that. I like what you say about telling the truth and not kind of pushing it off because it makes us uncomfortable. And I've always thought, when I ask about phrases to avoid, there's that phrase, at least, oh, my dog died. Well, at least you have another one. Or I lost one of my fields because I couldn't afford the rent anymore. Well, at least you have other acres still. And it's hard because they're trying to be helpful and to show the person the bright side, but it's accidentally minimizing what they're going through, kind of like that you weren't being serious about how you're feeling.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so happy you brought that up because we do talk about that a lot in our field, and the difference between sympathy and empathy. And at least is a very common statement. You are right, but it is a very minimizing statement. And so an alternative would be like, I'm really sorry to hear that, or I don't know exactly what that feels like, but I want to support you. That focus on listening and being quiet and just being present is so important. It's not necessarily easy, especially when we want to fix problems and when there seems like there's easy solutions. The reality is if there's a problem, there likely isn't that easy of a solution because we're problem solvers ourselves. We could have, tackled it. And so asking the question and then just waiting and maybe even repeating some of the things that they've said that they feel like, oh, it sounds like you're feeling anxious. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated, or whatever they are describing, and just trying to listen enough to at least be able to capture that in your own words is a helpful way to see if you are truly listening to what they are telling you.
And that kind of segues a little bit into my next question, because so someone's finally opened up the courage to tell you about their struggles. And like we mentioned before, talking about feelings can be difficult no matter what community you're in, but particularly in a community that's very, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And so when someone opens up to you and your mind is running through like 1,000 things to say and all of them just don't seem quite right, how can we navigate those situations? Like, what's the easiest way to have a conversation when you don't know what to say?
I would say to ask questions. So my favorite question to buy myself time when I'm having those conversations when I don't know what to say is, okay, that sounds really tough. What are you doing to take care of yourself going through all that? And this will also open up to the different types of things that they've maybe tried or haven't tried, and it allows you to be able to problem solve with them.
And I wanted to talk to you about that problem-solving aspect. As farmers, you have to wear so many hats, mechanic, agronomist, conservationist. Farmers are problem solvers. But when someone's telling you, I'm not doing well, my tractor needs repaired, the parts are going to take a few days to get here, rain's on the way, if I don't get the crop in, my yields are going to suffer, margins are tight, and I know I've been stressed out, it's taking a toll on my marriage. I just don't know what to do. And for some people, they're not trying to be insensitive, but they might say things like, well, all you need to do is X, Y, Z. That's the solution right there. And I'm sure there are people listening right now thinking, well, yeah, of course I'm going to offer up a solution if it's going to help. But sometimes it's almost like missing the forest for the trees, So my question is, what's the right balance in providing a solution without minimizing the emotional toll a situation is having on someone?
That is also super, super common. And we do, right? We want to just give those solutions, knowing that not every solution works for everybody, and not every solution that would work for somebody one day works the next day. And so, again, that golden question of what are you doing to take care of yourself? That sounds like a lot, is a good way to see what they're already doing, what they've already tried. And then saying, well, some people have done this and it's worked well. For others, this is another option. Is there something that you need? Is there something that I can do to help? And asking if there's something that I can do to help is tricky, right? Because usually if your neighbor's having the same issues, you're going through that same weather pattern too and experiencing some of it. And so just be mindful that if you do ask, what can I do to help? Be willing to then follow up with whatever the answer is, or be more targeted in that question, like, oh, can I do this to help you?
Sure, and that makes sense because then you're not kind of coming at it like an all-knowing being. You're just kind of being a human and leaving it kind of open-ended. It's almost like you're leaving the ball in their court at that point. Talk to me about, we've moved past stress. Clearly, this person is really in crisis. What can you do to help them maybe in that moment and maybe long term, particularly if you live in a rural area that doesn't have nearby mental health services?
Once we've moved past stress and that conversation has become clear, this person's in a crisis, well, first we want to be direct. What exactly is the crisis? And so when we talk about farmers and mental health, a lot of times that crisis is a suicide crisis. And so being and asking very directly about that and finding out if they are considering suicide and asking directly, like, are you thinking about suicide? And then the follow-up question to that, if the answer is yes, is do you have a plan? And so we know many farmers have access to firearms. And so in that case and in that moment, it is getting those locked up or put away, not forever, but until the crisis has passed. It's trying to build that support system around them. So making sure that their immediate family knows about them and that they are kept with somebody until they have access to that professional help. And then if your local area doesn't have a crisis response team, most of the police officers in the area are trained, but when you make that call, it's important that we say, I'm with so-and-so, and if you have a trained officer in a crisis response or a crisis response team, they would be the most appropriate help for this situation.
That's really good advice, and I have taken the QPR training, question, persuade, refer, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember that they talked about asking directly, are you thinking about committing suicide? And saying, at one point, maybe people thought that put the idea in people's heads to do such a thing, and how that's basically been proven false. But the thing that was even difficult for me sitting alone taking this training is they asked, go ahead and ask the question out loud. And it's a really hard question to say out loud. Are you thinking about committing suicide? So that would be very difficult to say to someone face to face, but obviously absolutely necessary.
It is. And if you've ever had to ask somebody this, It is awkward. There's no way around that. It's not comfortable. I have used that training quite a bit in my role, and we are a military and farm family, and so these conversations have come up. And what I like to try to tell people is, as long as you ask the question, it's okay if you're crying or shaking or not totally put together, but we do want to try to appear confident. So picture yourself like a duck, right? Floating on the water. The top part of the duck is totally cool and confident, but underneath the water, they're flapping their feet and they're going really fast. And it's probably the same way. So if you are asking the question, trying to appear confident and in control, even though knowing that realistically inside your heart might be pounding, you might be sweating, kind of losing your cool, that's fine. We are all that way, especially the first time we have this conversation. And you can ask that question, and the answer could be no, and you can still refer that person to some appropriate professional help. You just have a better understanding of really where that crisis lies.
Sure. And if more people were interested in learning about how to talk to someone who's going through a mental health challenge or a crisis, I know Iowa State has quite a few programs. Are there any that you want to speak to?
The two main ones that we are offering right now for free to folks is our mental health first aid class. And this one is a full 8-hour course, 2 hours online, 6 hours either virtually or in person. And this one is really well-rounded in the aspect of how to deal with all different levels of a mental health crisis or challenge, from just like really early signs that things aren't really in crisis mode all the way through to a full crisis. And so it's a great one if you're interested in this, and it has much more information. If you have less time, then Question, Persuade, Refer, or QPR, the program that we've mentioned a little bit earlier, is just a 1-hour program offered virtually and for free right now. And that one is labeled as a suicide prevention class, but fundamentally, it's what we've been talking about all day. It's just noticing the signs that something is wrong and knowing how to have a conversation that allows that person to share with you what's going on, and then knowing what resources are available and how you can try to direct them to help.
Yeah, and I've taken both, and I really did like the mental health first aid because it tells you over and over, basically, that your job is not to diagnose. It's to listen without judgment. And sometimes even that's just something that I think a lot of us need training for.
Yes, and there are plenty of trainings, luckily, on active listening that don't even have anything to do with mental health. So we can even practice active listening at church or at the bank or in some of the other times that we are having difficult conversations. That way, when it does come to be the ones about mental health, we are prepared. There is an additional program that 4-H is offering right now for their youth. That one is called Mindful Teen. And it is kind of like a book club for, I think, 7th through 12th graders. And they are able to learn some different mental health and mindfulness practices to just be aware of their thoughts and their actions and notice stress in their own bodies. And then they're also releasing a program called Mindful Family, which is, I think, pretty similar to that, only meant to be an all-encompassing family program. So I encourage folks to reach out to their local 4-H office if they are interested in that.
Awesome. That sounds like a pretty cool program because I think about even my almost 3-year-old, his daycare, they talk about having calm bodies. And so he'll tell me that when we need to calm our bodies, we take deep breaths. I'm like, yeah, that's right. And then, I said we have our 3-month-old. And so he says, and when Ellie needs to calm her body, she takes her pacifier. I'm like, hey, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Maybe the next generation will be a little more open and a little more focused in on what's going on. So we won't have to have these crisis conversations as often in the future.
Absolutely. I sure hope you're right. And Demi, thank you so much for your great insight today. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Demi. Mental health and managing farm stress are a couple of topics that we just can't emphasize enough. If you'd like to learn more about some of the programs that Demi mentioned, we've provided links to those in the notes for this podcast episode. We've also provided Demi's contact information there, along with a link to additional farm stress resources available at iowafarmbureau.com/farmstress. And with that, we've reached the end of this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I hope that you picked up on some useful insights from today's interviews and that you'll join us for our next regularly scheduled episode on May 17th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.